Are you curious to learn more about life? Do you want to hear the experiences of others? Or perhaps you're interested in discovering how to become a better person. Life is rarely what it seems on the surface. Some days feel challenging, while others feel special. For most people, life is a vast mystery filled with unanswered questions. Yet, finding beauty in the uncertainties of life is what makes it so meaningful. This summary aims to help you develop a stronger character, shape your personality, and adopt a more positive outlook on life. It shares the inspiring stories of people who overcame challenges and went on to live meaningful lives. Their experiences will motivate you to embrace life's ups and downs with resilience and purpose. A simple gesture. Mark was in 8th grade when he had a life-changing encounter. One day, on his way home, he noticed a boy up ahead stumble and fall, spilling his belongings onto the ground: books, clothes, a tape recorder, baseball gloves, and a hat. Without a second thought, Mark rushed over to help him gather everything. As they picked up the scattered items, Mark realized they were headed in the same direction and offered to walk with him. Along the way, they struck up a conversation, and Mark learned that the boy's name was Bill. Bill shared some of his interests with Mark. He loved baseball and history and enjoyed playing video games in his free time. As they continued talking, Bill opened up about some personal challenges he was facing. He mentioned having issues at school and in his relationship, and Mark listened attentively, offering supportive advice without judgment. When they reached Bill's house, Bill invited Mark to hang out for a bit longer. Mark accepted, and the two spent the entire afternoon together, drinking soda, chatting, and watching TV. From that day onward, they became close friends. They often had lunch together, sharing conversations and building a strong bond. After junior high, they both went on to attend the same high school, remaining friends throughout the years. Just before their high school graduation, Bill told Mark he wanted to share something important. He asked if they could talk alone, and Mark agreed. "Do you remember the day we first met?" Bill asked. Mark nodded. "Of course, I remember." Bill took a deep breath and said, "That day, I had all that stuff in my hands because I was clearing out my locker to bring everything home. I didn't want anyone to be burdened by me anymore. I was planning to go home and end my life that day. I had everything planned out. But when we met and started talking, something changed. You made me feel like maybe life was worth living after all. You didn't just help me pick up my things, Mark. You helped me find a reason to keep going. For that, I want to say thank you. You may never fully understand what you did for me, but you gave me hope when I needed it the most." Mark was stunned, realizing the impact of his simple gesture. He hadn't just offered a helping hand. He had unknowingly saved a life, proving that sometimes small acts of kindness can make the biggest difference. The Hugging Judge. Lee Shapiro was known as the Hugging Judge because he believed in the power of love and affection. A retired judge in the United States, Lee made it his mission to spread kindness through simple hugs. His car even had a bumper sticker that read, "Don't bug me, just hug me." Years ago, Lee created a special kit called the Hugger Kit. Inside, he kept small red hearts, each with the message, "A heart for a hug," which he would give to people as a token after hugging them. As his reputation grew, Lee became popular as a speaker at seminars and conventions, where he encouraged others to practice unconditional love. However, the local media in San Francisco challenged him, saying his Hugger Kit only worked because people at his conferences were already supportive of his message. They doubted whether his approach would work in the real world. Lee accepted their challenge and agreed to take to the streets of San Francisco with a television crew, offering hugs to random strangers. The first person he approached was a woman carrying groceries. "Hello," he said. "My name is Lee Shapiro, and I'm the Hugging Judge. Would you give me a hug in exchange for this heart?" The woman happily agreed, and they shared a hug. The TV crew, however, wasn't impressed, saying it was too easy, since she was just an ordinary person. Next, Lee spotted a police officer who was in the middle of issuing a parking ticket and having an argument with a car owner. Lee approached the officer and said, "You look like you could use a hug right now. I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge, and I'd like to give you a hug." To everyone's surprise, the officer accepted the hug. The crew decided to give Lee one last challenge: to hug a San Francisco bus driver known for being grumpy and irritable. Lee went up to the driver at the bus stop and introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Lee Shapiro, the hugging judge. You probably have one of the most stressful jobs in the world. I'm going around giving hugs to make people's days better. Would you like a hug?" The burly, bearded bus driver replied, "Why not?" and gave Lee a big hug. The TV crew was amazed, with the host admitting, "This is incredible. I'm truly impressed." One day, Lee's friend Nancy Johnstone invited him to visit a care facility for disabled individuals. Nancy, a professional clown, encouraged Lee to bring his hugger kit and meet with patients who were paralyzed, terminally ill, or mentally disabled. They arrived at the facility with balloons, party hats, and snacks to brighten the patient's day. Doctors and nurses helped them interact with each patient, offering hugs and kind words. The atmosphere was filled with joy as they went from one person to the next, bringing warmth and laughter. Finally, they reached the last ward, where the most severely affected patients resided. The sight of their suffering was overwhelming, but Lee and Nancy were determined to share some love and happiness. They gave each patient a balloon, a party hat, a small heart sticker, and, most importantly, a warm hug. One patient remained, named Leonard. Leonard wore a white bib around his neck because saliva constantly dripped from his mouth. His condition looked severe, and Lee worried he might not be able to make Leonard feel comfortable with a hug. Nancy, however, encouraged him to try. They placed a party hat on Leonard's head, and Lee gently stuck a red heart sticker on his bib before embracing him in a warm, heartfelt hug. To everyone's astonishment, Leonard began to make soft, bleating sounds, almost like a lamb. Ee! Other patients started making playful sounds as well, using whatever they could find to join in the excitement. Doctors and nurses rushed over to see what was happening. "What's going on?" Lee asked. The staff explained that this was the first time they had ever seen Leonard smile in his 23 years there. A simple hug had brought a profound change, showing that even the smallest gestures of love can transform lives. My Declaration of Self-Esteem. Virginia was a motivational speaker. During a convention, a 15-year-old girl in the audience asked her how she could become successful and train herself to be the best version of herself. Virginia responded with a simple yet profound statement: "I am me." Hearing this, the audience fell silent, and Virginia began explaining the deeper meaning behind her words. She told the audience that each of them was already their own best version. There was no one else like them in the world. Their words, thoughts, and actions made them unique. While they might share similarities with others, no one else was exactly like them. Continuing her message, Virginia said, "You are responsible for everything you do. How you feel depends on what you choose to feel. Every emotion you experience, every action you take, and every word you speak is your responsibility. It doesn't matter what you feel, do, or say. You've chosen to be that way." This, she emphasized, was the truth. Your dreams, hopes, and fears are uniquely yours. Every achievement you reach is entirely your own. No one else controls you but you. You have control over your actions and yourself, and no one else can dictate your life. In closing, Virginia explained the importance of building a good relationship with oneself. The first step to a fulfilling life is to be satisfied with who you are. She ended her talk with a powerful reminder: you are who you are, and that is perfectly okay. The rules for being human. An ordinary woman named Cherie put together a set of 10 rules for being human. These principles serve as timeless reminders of how we can live meaningfully and embrace our humanity. Rule 1. You will receive a body. No matter what shape or form it takes, your body is yours for life. You may accept it or not, but it's the only one you get. Understanding that there is no replacement helps us appreciate it more deeply. Rule 2. You will learn lessons. From the beginning to the end of life, every experience teaches you something essential. Life is a continuous journey of learning. Rule 3. There are no mistakes, only lessons. Mistakes are an inevitable part of life. When we look closer, we realize that what we call mistakes are simply opportunities to learn. Treat failures as stepping stones on the path to success. Rule 4. Lessons are repeated until learned. We don't always act rationally. Sometimes we're led by emotions, which can cause us to repeat the same mistakes. Each lesson will reappear until you fully understand it and learn to avoid it. Once you do, you're ready to face the next lesson in life. Rule 5. Learning never ends. Life will always present lessons and challenges, except that, as long as you're alive, there will be opportunities to grow, no matter how much you've already learned. Rule 6. There is no better than here. Focus on the present. You are exactly where you need to be at this moment. Appreciate what you have now instead of waiting for a future you think might be better. Rule 7. Others are mirrors of you. The people around you reflect aspects of yourself. If you have a positive relationship with yourself, you'll find it easier to build good relationships with others. Rule 8. What you need is within you. Everything you need is already inside you. You don't have to look elsewhere for worth or capability. You have the resources within you. What matters is how you use them. Rule 9. Your answers lie in your experiences. Trust your life's lessons to guide you. Seek your answers within, and remember that every experience contributes to your understanding. Rule 10. You will forget all this. As humans, we're prone to forgetting these truths. Return to these rules often, reminding yourself until the lessons become an integral part of you. These rules serve as a reminder to embrace life fully, to learn from each experience, and to appreciate the journey of being human. What you are is as important as what you do. Bobby Lewis was a father to 2 sons, Michael and Kurt. Michael, just 3 years old, dreamed of becoming a lawyer when he grew up, while 7-year-old Kurt wanted to be a doctor. One afternoon, Bobby decided to take his boys out to play, so they headed to a golf park. At the entrance, they needed to buy tickets, so Bobby approached the ticket counter and asked the man in charge, "How much does a ticket cost?" The man replied, $3 for adults and children over 6. Kids 6 and under get in free. Bobby took out $6 from his wallet and handed it to the man, saying, "Well, Michael is 3 and Kurt is 7. Here's $6. The man at the counter looked surprised. "You could have just told me your older son was 6, and I wouldn't have known the difference. Why spend the extra $3? Bobby explained his reason for honesty, saying, "You wouldn't have known, but my sons would." For Bobby, setting a good example for his children was far more important than saving a few dollars. You don't need to tell others who you are. Your actions should make it clear. Set a positive example for those around you, especially for your children. What you do will be what they emulate. A Legacy of Love. Al lived with his wife and two sons, Ernie and Jesse. One night, Jesse woke up with intense stomach pain. Al and his wife told him to try to sleep it off, assuming it was just a minor issue that would resolve by morning. Tragically, Jesse passed away in his sleep that night, and they later learned he had suffered from severe appendicitis. Devastated by Jesse's sudden death, Al blamed himself, falling into a deep depression. He kept thinking that if he had listened to Jesse's complaints, he might still be alive. Shortly after the tragedy, Al and his wife separated, leaving him with only Ernie. To cope with his grief, Al turned to alcohol, eventually becoming dependent on it. Years passed, and Al lost everything he once had: his property, his assets, his stability. Consumed by despair, he eventually decided to end his life. His body was later found in a motel room, marking a heartbreaking end to his story. When renowned author and speaker Bobby G. heard Al's story, she felt a mix of anger and sadness. How could someone end their life without achieving anything meaningful? It seemed like such a waste. Soon after, Bobby had the opportunity to meet Al's surviving son, Ernie. To her surprise, Ernie was a kind, caring, and compassionate individual, quite the opposite of what she had expected. She had assumed that growing up with a father battling alcoholism would have made Ernie resentful or hardened. Perplexed by Ernie's demeanor, Bobby decided to ask him about the source of his positive attitude, despite all he had been through. "Ernie," she began, "I'm very confused. Your father raised you alone, and as someone struggling with alcoholism, didn't you grow to resent him or feel bitterness toward the world? How is it that you're so kind and generous with those around you?" Ernie responded, "I always saw my father as a loving person. He never once made us feel unloved. Though he made mistakes, every night he would hug me and say he loved me. That's what I remember." Bobby was stunned. She realized she had misunderstood Al. He hadn't wasted his life. He had achieved something profound. In his own way, Al had been a loving father, and through his influence, he had raised Ernie to be a good-hearted person. Al had left behind a legacy of love. The Hand. A story about a first grader's unique yet meaningful drawing was once published in a newspaper around Thanksgiving. In a first-grade class, the teacher asked her students to draw something that symbolized what they were thankful for. She didn't expect much, as these children came from impoverished families and might not feel particularly grateful for anything. The teacher assumed most students would draw pictures of turkeys or food, but she was taken aback when she saw the drawing by a boy named Douglas. He had drawn a simple, open hand. The whole class was puzzled by this symbol. Whose hand could it be? One child guessed it was God's hand giving them food. Another suggested it was a farmer's hand, raising the turkey. As the other children returned to their work, the teacher quietly went over to Douglas's desk and asked, "Whose hand is this?" Douglas softly replied, "It's your hand, teacher." The teacher recalled how she would often hold Douglas's hand during recess. Douglas was a quiet, fragile boy who tended to be alone. She held the hands of her other students as well, but for Douglas, this small act had a special significance. The teacher realized that Thanksgiving was not only about being grateful for material things, but also for the simple gestures of kindness we can offer to others. Douglas's drawing reminded her that sometimes the smallest acts of love and support can mean the most. I Think I Can. One day, 5-year-old Rocky Lyons was traveling with his mother, Callie, in a truck passing through Alabama. As they drove, Rocky dozed off in the front seat, stretching his legs onto his mother's lap. Callie was carefully steering the truck across a bridge when they hit a pothole. causing the truck to veer off balance and skid toward the edge of the road. Fearing they might go over the side, Callie tried to regain control, pressing the gas pedal and turning the steering wheel. But Rocky's leg got stuck between her and the steering wheel, making it impossible for Callie to steer. The truck plunged 20 feet down into a ravine. The crash jolted Rocky awake. Confused, he asked his mother what had happened. Callie was bleeding heavily. Her face had struck the gear stick, leaving her with deep wounds, and a bone was protruding from her arm. She could barely move. Amazingly, Rocky was unharmed. Determined to help his mother, he climbed out of the wreckage and tried to pull her out too. As Callie started to lose consciousness, she told her son, "Let me sleep." But Rocky wouldn't let her drift off. He managed to get his mother out of the wreckage. He wanted to go find help, but Callie wouldn't let him go alone. Instead, they leaned on each other and started crawling up toward the road, inch by inch. Callie was in excruciating pain and was on the verge of giving up, but Rocky kept her going. He encouraged her by reminding her of the story of the little engine that could, urging her to think about the little train that kept going. Over and over, he comforted her with, "I know you can do it, Mom. I know you can." Finally, they reached the roadside. Rocky began to cry as he looked at his mother's injured face, but he stayed strong and waved down passing cars until a truck finally stopped to help. Rocky's bravery became a news sensation, but to him, it was simply what anyone should do in such a situation. Callie felt immensely grateful and proud of her young son. She knew that without his encouragement, she might not have survived. The 3-3-3 Story. Author Bob Proctor was attending a weekend forum in Toronto when the nearby city of Barrie was struck by a devastating tornado, resulting in loss of life and significant destruction. On his way home, Bob drove through Barrie and saw the ruins of homes and cars scattered across the landscape. Bob Templeton, the vice president of telemedia communications, had also seen the aftermath of the tornado and was determined to help the people of Barrie. He began brainstorming ways to support them through his radio station. At another seminar, Templeton approached Bob Proctor and expressed his desire to aid the residents of Barrie. Templeton gathered telemedia employees in his office and wrote 3 large threes on a whiteboard. Then he posed a bold question. How would you like to raise $3 million in just 3 hours over 3 business days? The room fell silent, with many doubting the feasibility of such a goal. People thought Templeton was being unrealistic. But he clarified, "I'm not asking if we can do it, or if we should do it. I'm asking if you want to do it." The employees responded affirmatively. Templeton then wrote a large T under the 3 threes and divided the board into 2 sections, why we can't on one side and how we can on the other. Under the why we can't side, he drew a big X, declaring any doubts about the task irrelevant. On the how we can side, he began listing ideas suggested by the employees. One employee suggested broadcasting a radio show across Canada, but others pointed out that telemedia's radio stations only covered Ontario and Quebec. Another employee proposed featuring well-known Canadian broadcasters Harvey Kirk and Lloyd Robertson as anchors for the show. However, this idea was also met with skepticism because both were television personalities, not radio hosts. Despite the challenges, a meeting was set for Friday. By Tuesday, they had organized a special 3-hour radio program for the Barrie tornado victims. Templeton and his team managed to bring Harvey and Lloyd onto the show, which was broadcast across 50 radio stations in Canada. In the end, they successfully raised $3 million in donations from across the country. This story illustrates the power of focusing not on why you can't, but on how you can achieve your goals. The Man Who Couldn't Read. John Corcoran struggled with dyslexia from a young age. Letters on the page seemed to jump around, making it impossible for him to read. In school, he would sit quietly, not understanding what was happening around him. At that time, people didn't understand dyslexia as a learning disability, so John was often labeled as stupid. His teachers would punish him for not being able to read or write. They'd force him to stand up and read from the blackboard, and John would stare helplessly at the letters, feeling a deep sense of shame. Each year, his teachers would pass him with the lowest marks, but no one took the time to teach him properly. In high school, John came up with a temporary solution. He joined the basketball team, became the MVP, was crowned prom king, and even dated the class's top student. When he graduated, his mother eagerly asked which college he would attend. But John was uncertain. He couldn't read, so college seemed impossible. Nonetheless, he enrolled at the University of Texas and joined the basketball team there. Throughout college, he sought out classes with multiple-choice exams instead of essay tests. He pretended to take notes in class, then secretly asked others for help. He also went to church, praying each day that he would somehow complete his degree. Years later, he graduated and became a teacher. Every day, he would ask his students to read from the textbook while he chose multiple-choice exams for his tests. He used a template with holes to grade the exams quickly without needing to read. Despite his success, John felt trapped and depressed, often staring at the ceiling for hours on weekends. Eventually, John met Kathy, a former top student and a nurse. When he revealed he couldn't read, she thought he was joking. She couldn't believe that someone who was a teacher could be illiterate. However, she realized the truth when she saw him struggle to read a story to their 2-year-old daughter. Kathy took on the responsibility of reading and writing all of John's letters and filling out forms for him. At 28, John took out a $2,500 loan to buy and renovate rental properties. His real estate business took off, and soon he needed a secretary, lawyer, and accountant to help manage it all. Months later, his accountant told him he was now a millionaire. John laughed at the irony. He couldn't even read simple signs like push or pull, often waiting outside restrooms to see which one was for men. Yet here he was, a millionaire. In 1982, things took a downturn. Tenants left, investors backed out, and John received numerous legal letters he couldn't read. Every day, he pleaded with bankers for extensions and his employees to stay. Frustrated, he dreaded the possibility of being asked in court, "John, can you read?" Finally, at the age of 48, John made 2 life-changing decisions. He mortgaged his family home for one last loan and went to a library where he confessed to the woman in charge, "I can't read," and broke down in tears. The library assigned him a tutor, a patient 65-year-old grandmother. She started by teaching him the sounds of each letter just as she would with a young child. After a year, John finally learned to read. His business began to recover as well. John was later invited to a conference for entrepreneurs in San Diego, where he revealed his secret to an astonished audience of 200 successful business people. He shared that just a year ago, he had been illiterate. John was eventually appointed to the board of San Diego's Literacy Council. He traveled across the U.S. giving speeches and saying, "We can't waste time blaming illiterate people. We need to teach them to read and write. Illiteracy is a form of bondage." Now, John read anything he could find: magazines, flyers, pamphlets, billboards. He felt immense pride in his ability to read and was determined to inspire others to overcome their challenges. Take a moment to really see. There's a well-known saying, "Stop and smell the flowers," which reminds us to take a moment from our busy lives and appreciate the present. Many of us, caught up in work and personal problems, rarely pause to truly live in the moment as our minds race with endless thoughts. Jeffrey was one of those people. One day, he found himself stuck in traffic on a main road in California. He was in a rush, heading to an important business appointment. As he waited at a busy intersection, his mind raced with thoughts about the proposal he was planning to present to a potential client. He figured that if he hit the gas as soon as the light turned green, he might make it on time. Foot ready on the pedal, he suddenly noticed a family crossing the road. The two adults, likely the parents, were both blind. Each held a cane in one hand while holding onto their children with the other. The father guided a young boy by the hand, and the mother clutched a small child to her chest. Jeffrey thought about how challenging it must be to navigate life without sight, especially while caring for young children. Crossing a busy 8-lane intersection without seeing the cars whizzing by must have been terrifying. Yet, at that moment, an extraordinary thing happened. Everyone watched in respectful silence. Even though the lights had turned green in some lanes, not a single car moved. Instead of the usual honking and yelling that fills rush-hour traffic, people called out, "Turn a bit to your right." Yes, just a little more. The couple carefully adjusted their steps, guided by the strangers' voices, until they safely reached the other side. A wave of relief washed over Jeffrey and everyone else who had been watching. As the family continued on their way, Jeffrey glanced at the driver next to him, who seemed just as moved by what they had witnessed. This encounter left a deep impression on Jeffrey. He realized he, too, needed to pause occasionally and live fully in each moment. Every experience, every present moment, offers a chance to bring new meaning into life. He began to appreciate the gift of sight, something many take for granted, as he thought about the difficulties of crossing a bustling intersection without it. From that day on, Jeffrey understood that everything we have exists in the present moment. He committed to focusing more on the here and now and using his abilities to help others. When we take a moment to truly see, we're likely to discover something amazing, as life is filled with wonders that can surprise us at any time. Conclusion. First, you've learned about the power of love. Showing love, expressing it, and giving to others are what truly matter in life. Second, you've explored self-love and confidence. To be successful, you don't need to change who you are. Stay true to yourself, and remember that making mistakes is normal. Life will challenge you with lessons along the way, and it's up to you to learn from them. Third, you've gained insights into parenting. There's no rule book on being a perfect parent. As humans, we all make mistakes. However, as parents, it's essential to set a positive example for your children, which helps you learn how to handle similar situations in the future. Fourth, you've discovered the importance of gratitude for everything you have, big or small. Often, we forget that the most important things can't be seen with the eyes. They're felt with the heart. Fifth, you've understood the value of resilience and never giving up. Sometimes, life presents problems that seem impossible to solve, but if you set your mind on a goal, gather ideas, and take action, you can overcome any obstacle. Sixth, you've learned about the strength in perseverance, even in the face of rejection. Life will always have its hurdles, but what matters is how you handle them. Finally, you've discovered universal wisdom. People around the world differ in many ways: language, religion, culture, and beliefs. Yet kindness is a universal language that everyone understands. You've also seen how a small act of kindness can create a big impact in someone's life. True happiness isn't found in material things, but in helping others and sharing what you have. Gratitude is the secret to happiness. appreciate, and value what you have. Never give up. Life will sometimes throw challenges at you that feel insurmountable. You may feel hopeless, but if you trust yourself and start seeing things positively, everything will eventually fall into place. Thank you for listening to this journey through Chicken Soup for the Soul. Let these stories remind you to pause, appreciate the simple moments, and connect with others. Life's greatest joys often come from small acts of kindness and gratitude. If you enjoyed this summary, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment below. Your support helps us bring more inspiring audiobook summaries to you. Stay tuned for more.